This may be the moment where we can tear down the Federal Reserve without having the devastating financial collapse that Ron Paul has warned about. This is exciting, you guys, because Dr. Ron Paul, former candidate for president, former Republican House member, and
my hero.
Yes, and now a fan of Austrian economics and longtime warner of what our I don't know if that's a word, warner of what our financial system is headed for. He has said that he thinks eventually our economy will have just a devastating Soviet-like collapse because we're not paying attention to what the Federal Reserve has done to us. Everyone has predicted that it will happen. Everything he said that he's predicted has happened. If you look at his book from 2009, End the Fed, he says he doesn't think Americans will actually do the right thing and end the Fed until a devastating financial collapse, because most politicians, they don't get it. Most Americans are not told the truth about the Federal Reserve, but maybe there's a way. So Federal Reserve Chairman Jerome Powell said last week when he announced lowering interest rates that if he were asked to step aside by President-elect Trump, he would simply not do it. Watch.
Victoria. Hi, Victoria Guido with Politico. Some of the president-elect's advisors have suggested that you should resign. If he asked you to leave, would you go?
No.
Can you follow up on, do you think that legally you're not required to leave?
No.
Okay, gotcha.
Unelected globalist who doesn't have to bend to the will of the president of the United States or the will of the people.
Yes. He was later asked to expand on this, and he said it's not permitted under the law. So you may ask, who does he think he is? Well, I'll tell you who he is. He is the head of the world's biggest financial cartel. But does his pride goeth before the fall? Because if the Trump administration did ask for his resignation and he refused, and there is either resulting litigation to the Supreme Court or a bill from Congress, could this possibly end the nightmare of the Federal Reserve? Well, Congress put the Fed in power in 1913. Congress could end it if we pay attention. So let's pay attention, because anyone who has a modicum of interest in that, if there's anyone who would do it, it would be Republicans if they actually did something brave, which they usually do not. The Federal Reserve was established in 1913 by the Federal Reserve Act of 1913 they called it furnish an elastic currency. Now that should give us pause, because elastic is a strange word for currency, right? Who is it they wanted the currency to be elastic for? Certainly not for the working man. You can tell who it was. It's for the powerful and the unelected. And in fact, this secret and powerful few is who we are not supposed to ask about. And we saw that in practice in 2008 when Fed Chair Ben Bernanke was asked who was receiving all of these bailouts during their financial collapse. He said this: well, some have asked us to reveal the names of the banks that are borrowing, how much they're borrowing, what collateral they're posting. He said, we think that's counterproductive. So it was counterproductive for the United States people, for American people, to know who was being bailed out by their own government. It's secret. It's supposed to be that way. In other words, the Fed works to protect the wealthy, and the working class gets screwed repeatedly when the market crashes and the American family's savings and assets deflate in value.
And the Fed was created secretively, of course.
Yes, exactly. Let's take a look at that story. This secrecy is built into the DNA of the Fed. Here's how Ron Paul explains it in his book. It was a secret meeting that happened at the home of J.P. Morgan himself, and the press was told that it was a hunting trip. Who was there? 2 Rockefellers, 2 Morgans, and a German central bank advocate, and a secretary to President Taft. They worked in secret for a full week to draft the legislation that would go to Congress that would then be the Federal Reserve Act. And the plan included full propaganda, an action plan with newspaper editorials, phony citizen leagues, and endorsements from trade organizations. And they took it to Congress and it passed. Now, Austrian economist Hans Sennholz would call this the most tragic blunder ever committed by Congress, and he warned that it would greatly contribute to unprecedented economic instability for decades to come. And in fact, we didn't even have to wait that long, because the first major fallout of the Federal Reserve came from the 1929 stock market crash. This is from this great book, which I highly suggest you read. It's not a very long read. The history books say that the roaring 20s and wild speculation caused that crash. That is a lie. The Fed caused the roaring 20s, which caused that crash. Here's how he explains it, is that the Fed pumped artificial credit into the loan market, which misled businesses and investors, made them take on overly ambitious growth projects, which they would not have done if the price of $1 was $1. He says the crash was made inevitable by the bubble caused by the Fed because they pumped the country with cheap money. The numbers speak for themselves. Since the creation of the Federal Reserve, the dollar has experienced over 3,000% inflation. Just look at an inflation calculator. That means that what you could buy for $1 in 1913, you now need $31 to buy. So you possibly could feed your family for $1 in 1913. $31 yesterday I spent taking my kids after a swim meet. I got 3 cheeseburgers and a milkshake for $31, which in 1913 would have cost $1.
Do you remember the dollar? I mean, even the dollar menu back in the day was transformative. They got rid of the dollar menu because you can't do anything for $1 anymore. But you could get like $1 cheeseburger.
Yeah,
you know,
right? Okay, that was on purpose, and in fact, that was the purposeful doings of the Soviet Union that led to the financial collapse. Now, not only that, the Federal Reserve caused the crash they caused led to blinding expansion of government. Roosevelt campaigned and won on the Great Depression. He was sworn in on March 4th, 1933, and launched what he called 100 Days, which led to the creation of a record-breaking government expansion. But even worse than that, possibly, than the manipulation of markets, is that the Federal Reserve causes war because Americans are told that they have to pay for war from their taxes and these wars are necessary. Well, before the Federal Reserve, the government could not afford to go to war because they had to actually have the money. The Federal Reserve allowed them to launch wars on credit and create money out of nowhere. And in fact, this lie started in World War I, right after the Federal Reserve came into effect, because the American people were told they needed to pay more taxes and they needed to buy war bonds in order to fund the war. But if you look at the data, in fact, that war was not funded on American taxpayers. It was funded by the Fed. Take a look at this. In total, scholars have estimated that only 21% of the First World War was funded through taxation. The remainder was funded by Fed-backed borrowing, 56% and outright money creation for the total cost of $33 billion. That's wild.
Another big piece of this too is that, you know, in World War II, we would buy these war bonds. Like everyone's like, you know, America's counting on you. Right. Go buy these war bonds right now to support the war, to fight Hitler. And it was all just a psychological experiment that the war bonds never were really funding the war at all. It was all funded by the Fed. It was all funded by the government. They were printing money and doing this. So it was just a psychological experiment to trick people into thinking like, we're fighting Hitler with our money. We're going to buy some war bonds and keep them in a shoebox and hand them down to our kids. It's garbage. It was fake.
So every war since has been financed by this idea of money creation.
Can we also say this too, is that the Fed, the idea of the Fed, or having the federalization of the US dollar, printing paper currency, was only meant really because of war situations, like in the War of 1812 and so forth. They would come in sort of temporarily and print these dollars for the purposes of funding a war. Yeah. And then the idea was when the war was done, we would go back to sort of a gold standard. We would remove ourselves from this paper dollars and we would go back to the, you know, sort of a gold standard. So that was supposed to happen. It happened every time we kind of went into a war. It would sort of temporarily step in and then step back until it stepped in permanently in 1913, and now all these wars.
We continue to be sold the lie that we need a war in order to pull us out of the economy. We saw that when Zelensky went to Pennsylvania and said, hey, you know, my war is really good for your economy because it allows people to make and sell bombs, rather. And Americans were told that the world wars are what pulled them out of the Depression. That was a lie because the economy never properly recovered because of the continued perversion of the Fed. Now, Americans were sold this idea repeatedly: Korean War, Vietnam War, Afghan War. Like, this is such a shit sequel, and we keep buying it. You guys, stop going to this movie. Literally, just stop. We asked Dr. Ron Paul recently if, in fact, we would have to have this catastrophe in order to end the Fed. He was on Redacted just before the election, and he said this.
But it always ends. It ends badly because a lot of people will be cheated and they'll go bankrupt. But to do it gracefully, like getting more members of Congress to vote it in and gradually just shrink the Fed, no way. It's not going to happen. But why? You say, well, why'd you waste all that time, talking about it? Because it'll end. It's going to end itself. And the big question is, what are you going to replace it with? The Marxists like it because they want chaos. They want excessive spending. They want chaos in the streets. They want these wars to agitate us. And then they will come in with their Marxism that they really want to promote. So that is a very, very strong scheme that we have to overcome. And that effort has been going on for a long time. So I would say that to eliminate it gradually is not going to happen. When it ends, though, that's why we have to have a replacement for it. And there's a lot of good history about it, our early history. They tried it with the continental dollar. They tried it with the national banks early on. And they tried it with the Federal Reserve.
Okay. So most people agree that Ron Paul is one of the smartest people in the room when it comes to the economy, I think. Do we all agree that?
Yeah. Yes.
And he has
100%.
been trying to bang this drum about ending the financial cartel for decades. He is, in my opinion, the loudest and smartest voice in the arena. What's encouraging, though, is that he has the ear of the Trump administration through Elon Musk. So just before the election, Musk said he would like Ron Paul to advise on the Department of Government Efficiency. And Paul said that he would do it. Here was this post on X. Elon Musk said, would be great to have Ron Paul as part of the Department of Government Efficiency. We think that Ron Paul may, in fact, be involved in the Trump administration because Elon Musk has asked him to advise on this Department of Government Efficiency, and Ron Paul said he would do it. Well, we all know what the first agency that Ron Paul would cut if he has his druthers. So could we actually have voted for people who will do this? Could we kneecap this sort of beast that is the Federal Reserve because we have people in office who have an appetite for it, and Jerome Powell has shown this pride that could lead to the fall.
If you suffer from daily pain, I need you to listen to this message very carefully. What we know about pain relief is changing forever. As we age, aches and pains are normal, and we're all searching for effective ways to relieve pain without side effects and addiction. Let's be frank, we've all seen the horrors of the opioid crisis. You may even be affected personally. Your family might know someone that has been affected by this. That's where a pioneering medical scientist comes in, Clint Winters. You may have seen the world-renowned health expert featured in the national media. He's unveiled a natural pain reliever that has taken the world by storm. And I'm talking about Canoladine, the 100% drug-free way to get full-body pain relief without dangerous pills. As you read this right now, Canoladine has become the go-to pain reliever for over 1 million Americans, hundreds of professional athletes. It was even named as the UFC's #1 official pain reliever for the UFC. Right now, you guys can try it. Go to trycano.com/redacted, and you're going to get it for less than $1 per day. You can access the only Canoladine product in the world for less than $1 per day. Clint has provided this special link for you guys. You can guys get this special discount. Just go to trycano.com/redacted. I see a bunch of people in the chat who've already ordered this. Give it a shot. If you suffer from chronic pain, you don't want to have that addiction from drugs, try kano.com/redacted, the 100% drug-free Canoladine. Try it for less than $1 a day.